Asian markets are mixed following Friday's declines on Wall Street as we enter the final week of the year. A turbulent year for Boeing as another crash kills 179 passengers in South Korea. And we look at why tech giants are turning to nuclear energy to power their AI-driven data centers. Hello, I'm Taiba Aydin with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. It's the final trading week of the year with Asian markets mixed following declines on Wall Street on Friday. South Korea's Kospi rose 0.9% while the Kosdaq added 1.74% on Monday, despite the country grappling with political turmoil and downbeat industrial data, among other things. Over in Japan, the Nikkei 225 fell 0.82% while the Topix was down 0.3%. That's as factory activity contracted at a slower rate in December, with the manufacturing PMI climbing to 49.6, up from November's reading of 49, but still below the 50 threshold that separates growth from expansion. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose 0.15%, while mainland China's CSI 300 climbed 0.53%. Traders await China's manufacturing PMI on Tuesday. And US stocks fell on Friday, led by technology shares, but major indices still rose for the week, on track for the best year since 2021. Let's get more on this now with Naeem Aslam. He's Chief Investment Officer at Say Capital Markets. Good to have you back with us, Naeem. Now, usually this time of year, we have what we call a Santa Claus rally. Given the declines on Wall Street on Friday, can we expect to see it happen this time?
Sure, thanks for having me as always. Look, I think this particular time things are slightly bit more different for two particular reasons. Number one is the substantial gains that we are looking at in terms of your quarterly gains. For instance, if you look at quarterly gains for NASDAQ, we are looking at a record gains that have been back to since 2021. And if you're looking at the yearly gains for the three major US stock indices, the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and of course the NASDAQ, we can see that we are still sitting on a very, very double-digit handsome gains for all the three major indices. So it is very natural for investors and traders to take profit given the gains that we have seen. And secondly, and more importantly, of course, we will have a new US president going into the office. So I think investors want to recalibrate things going into 2025. And at the same time, there's this spirit of holidays among a lot of investors, which is keeping the volume in the market on the low side as well. So to answer your questions, can we see further rally into the market? I think the chances are a little bit slim, but we could see a small gradual move to the upside. But with a major rally or the major trend, we will only see it going into January 2025.
All right, and looking at Japan now, factory activity is still below that mark, separating growth from contraction. What's happening on that front?
Yeah, Taiba, you were absolutely correct in pointing that out with the separation of contraction and where an expansion, the important level of 50. I think Japan is still, we have the same issues which we've experienced in the previous quarters, and that is the central bank's policy, the BOJ's policy in relation to its monetary policy and how the bank is really trying to tackle inflation while also trying to think what other central banks are also doing around the world. For example, the Federal Reserve, the ECB, the Bank of England, because obviously we are looking at a cycle of interest rate cuts. And inflation is somewhat under control in this particular world. But I think when it comes to Japan, we are still looking at a very different equation altogether. And that is very much weighing up on momentum. And secondly, more importantly, once again, is going to be the conversations of trade tariffs and how that is going to impact the global growth. So I think investors are keeping an eye on these things. But we are very much optimistic in terms of a Japanese market going into 2025, and we do expect the manufacturing data to move into positive territory, or let's say in the expansion territory, and produce a reading above that 50 mark that you mentioned.
All right, Naeem Aslam, Chief Investment Officer at Zay Capital Markets, thank you very much for your analysis.
Thanks for having me.
Staying in Japan, the government has approved a record-breaking budget for the upcoming fiscal year amid political tension. The budget for 2025 totals $730 billion, surpassing the previous record of $726 billion set for 2024. For the 11th consecutive year, Japan's budget draft has set a new record for national defense spending, allocating at $55.1 billion. The Ministry of Defense says the nation faces the most difficult and complex security environment since World War II, highlighting the critical need for enhanced military readiness. Expanding social security costs is another key driver of the budget's growth, sparking concerns over Japan's fiscal stability. Of the total budget, $24 billion, or around a third, is dedicated to social security, reflecting the ongoing challenges of an aging population and declining birth rate, which weigh heavily on Japan's economic future. Moving on to South Korea now, where the Transport Ministry says the pilot of the Jeju airplane that crashed at Muan Airport on Sunday morning declared Mayday following a bird strike. The call for help was made before the aircraft crash-landed on the runway and burst into flames. Authorities say there was no time on the ground to prepare for an emergency landing. 179 people were killed in the incident. A team of US investigators are joining local authorities to probe possible causes. The Boeing 737-800 was carrying 181 people from Thailand to South Korea when it crashed, killing all on board apart from 2 flight attendants. Both black boxes, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, have been found.
When I saw the accident video, it seemed like out of control when the plane entered the airport. The pilots probably had no choice but to do it. My daughter, who was only in her mid-40s, ended up like this. This is unbelievable.
Now, the aviation industry faced a turbulent year, with Boeing aircraft encountering several challenges. From mechanical failures to tragic accidents, the spotlight remains on safety and accountability. Here's a timeline of the key incidents in 2024. On January 5th, shortly after takeoff, an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 experienced an explosive decompression. Faulty installation of a door plug was identified as the cause, grounding 171 aircraft for inspections. In May, at 32,000 feet, a Southwest Airlines flight faced uncontrollable side-to-side yawing motion. Luckily, the pilot managed to ensure a safe landing. June 23rd, Midway to Taiwan, Korean Air's Boeing 737 MAX 8 suffered a cabin pressure fault. The plane returned to Incheon with 15 passengers treated for hyperventilation and eardrum injuries. December was the worst month for Boeing aircraft. On the 28th, a KLM Boeing 737-800 diverted to Sandeford Airport following a hydraulic failure. The aircraft veered into a grassed area during landing. Just a day later, a Jeju Air Boeing 737-800 belly landed at Muan International Airport, crashing into a concrete wall. Tragically, 179 of the 181 on board lost their lives, marking a dark day in aviation. Following these incidents, Boeing initiated worldwide inspections to address potential systemic issues. The focus was on identifying vulnerabilities in rudder systems, hydraulic controls and cabin pressurisation mechanisms. Let's get more on this now with aviation analyst Keith Tonkin in Brisbane, Australia. Good to have you on the programme with us, Keith. Now, why do you think we're witnessing so many incidents involving Boeing aircraft this year, and what implications does this have for the company?
It does seem like there have been a lot of Boeing aircraft incidents and accidents this year, and hopefully that's the end of it with only a day to go now. The different types of aircraft that have experienced those issues are relatively not connected. The MAX aircraft that had those issues earlier this year are relatively new and very different to the one that had the accident in South Korea just now. The 737-800 has been flying in service since the late 90s, decades now, and there's a lot known about that aircraft and the way it operates and flies and the systems on board. So I'm not convinced that accident has any direct correlation with some of the other issues with the Boeing aircraft. Boeing will be very concerned. We've seen some of the results of the investigations and the penalties that have been applied, and it's doing a lot to try and rectify the situation to retain its credibility and to make sure that its aircraft are safe.
And how would you assess Boeing's current safety protocols compared to industry standards?
There have been some real significant issues identified by the FAA in America, which is the regulatory authority responsible for the Boeing aircraft, to make sure that they're designed and manufactured according to the relevant standards and that they're fit for purpose and safe to enter into service. And those issues are being rectified through a program with relevant oversight. And we have every confidence that the aircraft flying that are released for service are safe and that they will continue to be so in the future.
And what specific areas is Boeing falling short?
There are different issues identified for different aircraft types. We mentioned the MAX 9 with the door plug issue. That was specific to that aircraft. There were some issues in manufacturing certain parts, and Spirit Aerosystems, which is the organisation responsible for manufacturing some of those parts, has been taken back by Boeing after it was divested. So there are things being done, works underway to try and fix those problems, and the FAA and the regulatory authorities are certainly giving that a lot of scrutiny as well.
And how have these series of incidents impacted Boeing's stock performance and overall market position?
Well, it's certainly impacted at the bottom line for the company. They've had to lay off thousands of workers. The queue for airlines wanting to buy aircraft has now moved from Boeing across to Airbus. So Airbus is trying hard to manufacture aircraft as quickly as it can to try and secure more of the market, but it's a limited pipeline. And Boeing has also been restricted in how many aircraft it can manufacture. So it's certainly feeling the pinch, and it'll be trying very hard to rectify those issues, to gain confidence for the industry and make sure it can continue to prosper in the future.
All right, Keith Tonkin, we will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Very welcome.
Now, a quick look at some of the other top business stories from around the world. The UK will start taxing private schools from January, raising $1.9 billion to improve public education. Private schools will pay 20% tax on tuition fees, which average $22,600 a year. The money will be used to hire new teachers and improve state schools. The government says the plan will help reduce education gaps. Homelessness in the US rose by more than 18% this year, reaching over 770,000 people. Officials say rising housing costs and natural disasters have fueled the surge. Family homelessness also jumped 39%, with numbers doubling in areas affected by migration. The total marks the highest level since the federal government began its annual count in 2007. Italy's parliament has approved a $31 billion budget for 2025 that aims to cut fiscal deficit to 3.3% of GDP. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's third budget focuses on tax cuts and social security for low-income citizens, including an $1,100 baby bonus for families. Italy has previously pledged to bring its fiscal deficit below the EU's 3% of GDP ceiling in 2026. And Huawei surprised shoppers with a significant price drop during a Super Brand Day promotion on JD.com. Discounts of up to $411 were offered on a variety of high-end devices, including smartphones, tablets, smartwatches and headphones. The sale, which ran from Saturday evening to midnight on Sunday, quickly became a hot topic among tech enthusiasts looking to grab a bargain. Welcome back. Google announced it's turning to nuclear energy this year to power its artificial intelligence data centers. The company says the investment will provide it with 500 megawatts of power. But it's not only tech companies that are showing a greater interest in nuclear energy. Governments are also jumping on the bandwagon, as Emre Boz reports.
Some analysts say the age of artificial intelligence is in full swing, with tech giants investing heavily in the technology. But as these systems become more complex and data centers more powerful, how are firms powering their AI efforts? Well, for Google, it's all about nuclear. Working together with startup Kairos Power, they're planning to build 7 nuclear reactors to support their AI, and nation-states want in on the action as well. As of July this year, China is currently building 25 reactors. They're at the top of the list of nations investing in nuclear. This is followed by India at 7 and Turkey at 4. The number of investments into nuclear power and other clean energy has seen an upward trend since 2015. The number of global investments almost doubled in the last 9 years, reaching $80 billion. So why nuclear energy? Many countries view nuclear power as more reliable and an efficient alternative to fossil fuels. It also allows nations to diversify their energy sources away from imports. Conflicts in the Middle East, like the war on Gaza and Russia's war in Ukraine, have continued to disrupt global coal, oil, and natural gas supply chains, making nuclear power a more reliable alternative. Europe looks like one of the key investors in nuclear power. Over 40% of their total domestic electricity generation comes from nuclear power. But the use of nuclear has its risks. Take, for instance, the nuclear disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station in 2011. The facility was flooded after a tsunami hit the region, and the spillover radioactive wastes contaminated the environment, forcing thousands to evacuate. Despite the risks, it looks like for many countries, nuclear power is still an attractive source of investment. Emre Boz, TRT World.
As the tech industry accelerates the development of artificial intelligence and cloud computing, the energy demands of data centers have reached unprecedented levels. This rapid growth has prompted major players like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta to reconsider their energy strategies, transitioning from a renewables-only focus to embracing nuclear power. AI and cloud data centers could soon consume more energy than entire cities. By 2050, global electricity use may rise by 75%. Tech industry ambitions are driving a significant share of this surge. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta are leading investments in nuclear power. Their data centers demand steady, round-the-clock electricity. Nuclear power offers efficiency, reliability, and sustainability at scale. Nuclear energy is carbon-free and runs 24/7. Experts call this shift a nuclear revival, transforming global energy strategies. Massive infrastructure investments drive local economic growth and job creation. For more on this, Filiz Katman joins us from Istanbul. She's the president of the Energy, Politics and Markets Research Center at Istanbul Aydın University. Good to have you on the program with us. Now, how do data centers powering AI impact global energy consumption trends?
As you have mentioned in the video, energy demand is rapidly rising with artificial intelligence usage, and it is projected that in future the major demand will be generated from use of artificial intelligence. That's why it's a kind of preemptive solution to prevent any kind of disruptions in the system by focusing on nuclear energy. As you have mentioned in the clip, it has many positive aspects with regard to energy independency and sustainable energy provision, but it has some challenges, as you have mentioned, with the previous Fukushima and Chernobyl disasters. But still, in comparison to others, nuclear energy provides more benefits in terms of efficiency.
And why are major tech companies investing in nuclear power now, and how big of a scale are they at the moment?
We have a kind of breakpoint here. We should definitely call COVID-19 pandemic. Until COVID-19 pandemic, there was a reverse tendency just with regard to closing down nuclear energy power plants. But with COVID-19, it is revealed that having your own sources is more important than anything else, like focusing on your efforts. So in that manner, that is also perceived by the energy companies, because if you are dependent on energy resources which are subject to conflicts, as you have mentioned, in the Middle East, in Caucasus, in Central Asia, so it creates like some kind of fragility, and we all know that companies are not flexible to that fragility. So that's why primarily big companies are focusing on self-sufficiency instead of buying it from somewhere else.
And what does the nuclear revival bring for the broader economy?
Yes, this is one major question that we should focus on with regard to global economy. Yes, nuclear energy provides a potential with regard to economic heat up, because we have a hyperinflation problem which freezes some kind of investments. So if there will be investments on nuclear energy, it will definitely provide new jobs in the markets. It will motivate some kind of industries which necessitate the usage of certain materials which are necessary for the power plant construction. But on the other hand, it will also ramp up with regard to investments on clean technologies. So it has some benefits which will contribute to the global economy, which are in stock at the moment with stagflation and with hyperinflation.
Filiz Katman, President of the Energy, Politics and Markets Research Centre at Istanbul Aydın University. Thank you very much for your time.
It's my pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you.
Now, former US President and Nobel Peace Laureate Jimmy Carter has died aged 100. The 39th president campaigned for global health and human rights long after his single term in office. Sharon Ogunleye looks back at his life.
Solemnly swear. Jimmy Carter was many things: farmer, Navy man, deacon, humanitarian, statesman, the 39th President of the United States, and the longest living former American head of state. Carter rose from humble beginnings as a peanut farmer's son to defeat Gerald Ford in the 1976 presidential election. The racial segregation he witnessed in rural Georgia planted the seeds of his political views. Carter supported the growing civil rights movement and pushed for affirmative action for minority groups, saying the Bible taught him humanity. He tried to impart that during his presidency, pardoning Vietnam draft dodgers, pushing social reforms at home, and bringing together enemies abroad, most visibly in the Middle East. Carter mediated the historic 1978 Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt, and in doing so revived the practice of presidential peacemaking. But despite the cheers, the Cold War cast a dark shadow over Carter's presidency. A revolution and failed rescue attempt of American hostages in Iran, and an oil crisis which caused rampant inflation and a recession at home. Eventually, Carter managed to negotiate the release of the American hostages, but it was too little too late. He lost the 1980 election to Ronald Reagan, becoming one of only 6 U.S. presidents to serve one term. But Carter was far from over. In many ways, he was only just getting started. He set up the Carter Center in 1982, traveling the world as a peace negotiator and an election observer. He ended a nuclear standoff in North Korea, averted an American invasion of Haiti, and advocated an end to Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands, work that helped him win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. His wife, Rosalie, and his faith were his two constants. He thanked both when doctors thought cancer would finally end his life in 2015.
But I was surprisingly at ease. You know, I've had a wonderful life. I've had thousands of friends, and I've had an exciting and adventurous and gratifying existence. So I was surprisingly at ease, much more so than my wife was. But now I feel, you know, that it's in the hands of God, whom I...
But he bounced back, and well into his 90s, Carter built homes for the poor, helping to lift more than 5 million people out of poverty. On March 21, 2019, Jimmy Carter became the oldest living American president, a title formerly held by George H.W. Bush, who died aged 94. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, Carter was unable to attend the inauguration of Joe Biden. It was the first inauguration Carter and his wife have missed since his own in 1977. But the Bidens visited the Carters in Georgia on Biden's 100th day in office. Carter had been in hospice care since February 2022 and lost his wife the following year. They had been married for 77 years. The Nobel Peace Committee said that Carter may not have been the most effective president, but as ex-president, he may have been the best the U.S. ever had.
Well, that's all your business news for now. Thanks for watching.